Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group, with Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Phil, it's a mega weekend for listeners this weekend, isn't it? It's the new September plate change. 73 plate is now on sale. Forecourts and showrooms are ready, and hopefully
there's some activity going on. Yeah, that's the I think what one thing is clear, and I'm sure many of the listeners this morning will be thinking, yeah, it's not so good for me, or it might be good for them. I think it's very much brand specific this year, more than ever, because I've heard various reports from the market where some have got very strong order banks. You know, they've kind of achieved targets pre going into September. You know, very positive. Some are saying that supply is still a problem, and product might not be arriving until sort of October, November time. Some manufacturers that are slightly behind on product, and others are just not doing very well at all as an OEM. And we won't go who they may be, because I think we've talked about them a couple of times on the
we have podcast. Indeed, yes.
But I think some OEMs are struggling in general. So I think it very much depends who they are representing. Will be depending what they'll be taking a view of this morning's podcast, won't they, Curtis?
Yeah, definitely. And there is a lot of marketing going around on the back of the September plate change. You know, there are some good deals out there. I am seeing a lot, and it does kind of make you wonder, how strong this September will be in relation to previous ones. I mean, certainly be up on last year's, but are we going to nudge closer to those pre-COVID levels, do you think?
I mean, there's a big push. There is certainly a big push. I think, the OEMs certainly know that, it's the last opportunity this year to get some serious numbers in. We know it's the kind of the year of production recovery, and there's a big sort of, chase for market share and registrations. As you say, I mean, the campaigns, the subvented finance, deposit contributions, part exchange guarantees, cashbacks, they're back to the pre-pandemic levels now. That there's some big discounts now on a lot of the product out there. So the OEMs are certainly trying to ramp up the business. We've seen over recent months, the retail is still a challenge. A lot of the activities are going through fleet and lease, but they again, at the end of the day, they generate defleets, they generate used part exchanges coming off. So I get the feeling it might be all back end weighted in the month. I think we'll start to, I think we'll see a lot of the last minute registration activity in the last sort of week and days of the month. But I think we'll be getting towards that pre-pandemic averages, I suspect.
Yeah, that takes us back, doesn't it? All that activity in the last week.
The last 3 days,
yeah. We'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of administrators and not happy people in the last couple of days of September this year, I suspect. But there'll be getting onto that AFL system, and it'll probably crash. It normally crashes when you're the last day when you need to get those deals done. AFL will go down for a period of time and cause the businesses a lot of stress and pain as normal.
But we wish you well. Let's hope this is a good, strong September.
Exactly.
Yeah. So also this episode, we've got an extract from the interview we did during the week with Darren Martin from CAP HBI, with Darren looking at August's trade values, how they panned out. So the full episode is available on your podcast feed, but we will have a little extract from that as well.
Yeah, have a good listen to that. So, again, he does say in the interview that the devil is in the detail, and it is more than ever, as always now, around what is happening in the market, and gives a little bit of clarity that how the market's performing and how he expects it to perform over the next sort of few months.
Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group.
So headlines this week are from Car Dealer, Auto Retail Agenda, AM and Motor Trader. And we'll start in a minute with that CAP HBI report on used car values. They dropped 2% in August. It's the biggest drop of the year so far, but very much as prices continue to realign. The cost of living crisis means used car buyers are turning to older models to save money, reports eBay Motors Group. Independent dealers react to ULEZ expansion, with some turning away non-compliant part exchanges. We'll be asking whether or not Big Motoring World is set to buy available car. That's a story that's really hit the headlines as we record this. EV supply is outstripping demand as we enter the September plate change, says Virtue. And finally this week, Hedin announces a new structure for its UK business. But before we go any further, here's that extract from our interview with CAP HBI's Director of Valuations, Darren Martin, on how values performed in August.
Let's start off as the usual in terms of the headline trade values at 3 year, 60,000 miles. We know that they're down 2%. It's equal to £390 for the month. And I mean, what drove it, and how does this compare to previous Augusts in probably previous years and normal seasonality years?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it doesn't. It's quite a large movement for August, but it doesn't feel that bad. As I said, it's a bit slow. Demand is a bit slow. It's the holiday season. Supply levels have increased, but it doesn't feel that bad. But I think vendors are prepared to take a little bit less than they have done previously. Values are obviously still high. Go back 3 years, we were in the middle of like a really strong period for the market, and they ended up going up 30-40%. We're still sort of got cars that are way ahead of where they were priced 3 years ago. I think the highest one is sort of 70% ahead of that time. We've got cars that are 50% ahead of where they were 3 years ago, which is thousands of pounds more. So you kind of throw the demand's a little bit light, supply is increasing, and values are high. You've got those sort of three main factors that are just meaning that values are dropping, but they're not crashing. Really keen to point that out. They are just coming down more than we've experienced in previous Augusts. I think the average August from between 2012 and 2019, so those sort of pre-COVID times, since we introduced live in 2012, it was just a 0.6% drop. So for it to be a 2% drop is sort of harsher than the average. We haven't had a drop above 2% since 2010, when it was 2.4%. So we've had a lot of stable years. So it's it feels like quite a big drop for an August, but you have to put it into context that values are still a lot higher than they were three years ago, and will remain so for some time.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, year to date, I think we're down 7.4% year to date. So you're now in the month of coming into the month of September. That's not excessive, is it? For this time of the year?
Not at all. And for the first 3 months, values went up. In our live product, January, February, March, we saw the live movements increasing. We've had drops in the last 5 months, but values do tend to come down in more normal years, which we haven't had for some time. Values will come down. So it's just that if you look at sort of August in isolation, it is a heavier drop than you would expect, but a little bit of realigning, a little bit of vendors probably thinking one eye on September. There's going to be more volume coming back. They don't want to be carrying a load of stock in, so they are prepared to sort of take some price cuts at the moment. And also dealers maybe not stocking up in bulk and not going out and replacing it again, with one eye on more volume coming in September, and maybe some better deals around. So if they are buying, they're probably not paying what they were previously, hence the drop. We're very data driven. We're basing it on what we're seeing in the sold data. So yeah, it's been interesting times, but as I say, not a crash, but just not that dealers not prepared to pay what they were previously for cars, especially if they've got a little bit of damage on them as well. We've also reduced our average and below values at certain price points this month, because the data was telling us that dealers are paying even less for cars with engine management lights on or a bit of damage on them. They don't want them sat in a workshop, especially in times of values dropping. They're taking a bit of a book drop, so to use a sort of a cap phrase.
So I think Clearly there, Curtis, sort of an insight into the full interview there with Darren, putting context behind the movement, where it sits in terms of, comparison to, recent years and where it sits to a normal August going into September. But what was interesting, he was talking about stocking levels and buyer dealers and what they were going to buy and replace stock, and thinking about this month of September that we were just talking about before, and the fact that he was mentioning there that they've readjusted the average and below to reflect the condition of vehicles and the nervousness for dealers getting into poor condition vehicles that are taking a little bit too long to get on the forecourt. So kind of segues quite nicely into some of the headlines this week, Curtis.
It does indeed. It's almost as though we planned it this way, Phil. So the first story, the first headline that we'll look at is from Car Dealer, and the headline there is "Cost of living crisis means used car buyers are turning to older models to save money," reports eBay Motors Group. So this is the monthly market view from eBay Motors Group, and I did work with the guys on the release for this one, and saw the data, and it is very revealing, in terms of what buyers are looking for at the moment, and what is catching their eye, and also how they're choosing to spend their money with this cost of living crisis impacting budgets. So the data actually found 4 in 5 online searches for cars over the course of August had been for models that were either 5 years old or older. Now, the analysis actually revealed that older cars made up 81% of all searches on motors.co.uk. And that actually compares to 77% at the same point last year. So there is an upshift there in these searches for older cars. And the data goes on to show that the age bracket, so this 5+ year age bracket, made up 52% of all listings on the website, with that stock availability increasing just 1.5% year on year. So although it's 52%, it's not keeping up with that level of demand, or certainly interest from buyers. So some interesting developments here, Phil.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, with data, you can get it to tell the story that you want it to tell you. There's always the risk into it with these things, but clearly, the alongside that cost of living, the pressure that's out there in the market, and particularly, that consumer market, the data just, it reflects that sentiment, doesn't it? Clearly, yeah. and even, when we start talking about stock levels that, Devon sort of alluded to in the interview there, that the data, it actually does suggest that as well, saying that the average dealer inventory dropped month on month from 58 average to 56 units, with the biggest shortfall being felt by franchise dealers, dropping from 75 units to just 70 units. So clearly, we're seeing this shift in age and price brackets, but at the same time, the dealers shift in terms of stock levels as they enter the month of September and potentially a more challenging second half of the year.
Yeah, and it's worth just adding a bit of context, as indeed Darren did in his interview. August is traditionally a quieter month, isn't it? Because that's when people are on holiday. If they're thinking of spending money, they've already invested it in the holidays. They're not necessarily thinking about cars. So, the market was flat in August, but no cause for concern, because it's really going back to that sort of seasonality that we used to see year in, year out.
Exactly. And talking about dealers and moving on to the next story and staying with Car Dealer. And this is fascinating, because we touched on the ULEZ last week around the increase in those sort of pre-1983 classics and the shift in appetite towards those vehicles. But now the headline goes into that used car dealers react to ULEZ expansion as they say they are now turning away non-compliant parts exchanges. And this is an investigation by Car Dealer that has gone into some detail with some dealers within the M25 that are saying it's affecting the capital's used car showrooms, that businesses say they are now turning away non-compliant part exchanges as they are now paying to sell. And the owners say profits are increasing as ULEZ compliant stock becomes worth more. So it's kind of an interesting shift, this, because you're getting a clear, a geographic dynamic playing out just because of the ULEZ.
Yeah, it's a fascinating piece, and Car Dealer have done a really good job on this, because what they've done is they've spoken to 3 independent dealers within the M25. So McCarthy Cars, Kassam Cars, and Cottage Car Sales, just to see how the first few days even of the rollout of the ULEZ, which actually happened last Tuesday, is impacting business. And I thought one of the most revealing comments was from Jim McCarthy of McCarthy Cars, who are based in Croydon, because he's saying that looking at diesel in particular, diesel stock has become, in his words, a real pain to shift. So he's actually saying we have sold cars off the back of ULEZ, but what we have ended up with is a few non-ULEZ diesels, which, to be honest, are a bit of a pain for us to get rid of. Now, this is a dilemma, isn't it, for dealers? Because if they're getting these non-compliant cars coming in from as part exchanges, they don't want to lose that potential customer because they don't want to take their part exchange. But what Jim McCarthy says is that with some of these customers, he's actually been advising them to go to places like We Buy Any Car to get rid of their old car and continue the transaction with them, because they don't want the car, and they can't trade it out in a way that they could have done before, and whilst retaining a bit of profit on the deal. So it is a dilemma facing dealers within the M25,
and I suspect it's kind of one of them that if you're an independent retailer within that M25 compared to your groups and supermarkets who have the advantage of scale and geographic scale, that they can still bring those cars in part exchange, maybe take advantage that the customer's looking at getting out of a non-compliant vehicle. And I don't want to expect any dealers to take advantage of consumers in any way, Curtis. But but then they can shift that vehicle away, and they can shift it into one of their locations that is not suffering from the ULEZ issue. But those independents that are sat there, they don't have that option, do they? As easy as some of the larger groups may have.
No, the last thing they want is a non-compliant car on their forecourt taking up valuable space. And the flip side of this is demonstrated by Kassam Car Sales, who, funnily enough, they're based near Uxbridge, where that's where a lot of the controversy around ULEZ really came to the fore last month, over the course of the month with the by-election. But Ashraf Kassam from Kassam Cars, he's talking about the impact on petrol cars. So he says petrol cars are obviously going up in value, and we are making more money now. Buying from auction, you do not have to pay more, but they are selling for more in the business. I'm sorry, buying from auction, you do have to pay more, but they're actually transacting for more money. So it's showing the flip side of petrol and diesel within the M25.
Yeah, and a clear geographic dynamic starting to play out there. And on the flip side of that, you've still got ever decreasing availability of petrol and diesel. It becomes the market share reduces as the push towards EV. So those vehicles become tougher and tougher to locate, and therefore at the same time has a demand as well. So you're getting some of that price dynamic starting to play out. So it'd be interesting to see, what that does over time, and maybe we'll get something from eBay Motors at some point and see what that data looks like.
You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
So next headline is from Auto Retail Agenda, and it is Big Motoring World set to buy available car. Now, as we record this, it's very much an ongoing story, isn't it? So we'll just qualify that with a question mark at the end. But this broke towards the end of the week, and it was followed up by car dealers. So in our newsletter that goes out on Monday, we'll put in links to both stories, but it was Auto Retail Agenda that broke the story. But we actually had a sneak preview of this, didn't we? A little teaser a couple of months ago when we spoke to Peter Waddell.
We did. Would you like to hear it, Curtis?
Oh, have you got it lined up, Phil?
I just might have. Bear me 2 secs.
Yeah, let's take a listen.
No, we're looking at going up north. We're looking at about going in other big places. I can't say too much at the moment, but I can tell you that we will probably double in size in the next 18 months, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and especially in what you've already said about really thinking nationally, because at the moment the business is pretty much based in the southeast, stretching up to Peterborough. But you're thinking more nationally, aren't you?
Absolutely, we will end up all the way, as they say.
Up to the ceiling.
The good thing about it is, for me to go national, is I fly a helicopter, as most people will know. So for me to fly to Nottingham, Coventry, all the way up there is not a problem. It's a 40-minute drive or fly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You heard it first
It's
on
a
the
wonder,
Motortrade Radio podcast. No, he didn't name names, but I think we can draw our own conclusions, can't we?
Yeah, I mean, when he said Nottingham and Coventry, I'm thinking at least he didn't say Castle Donington, Sutton in Ashton, Lanark and Leeds, which are the 4 locations that available car have got. So he could have actually said them, and then would have, that would have been good. But no, I mean, as you say here, in that long chat, he has huge aspirations. I think, where some of the supermarkets are facing challenges in terms of stock acquisition and managing the challenges of the shortage of production and transition to electrification and what that's doing in terms of fuel share, etc. I think, clearly Pete has significant growth aspirations. He's been reporting some very good profits, and as he alluded to there, he's obviously looking at expanding, which kind of does sort of link into that rumour, should we say, at this point, because that's what it is. But he's not ruling out the rumour, is he?
No, he's not. Car dealer in their story certainly tried to get in touch with Peter, but he wasn't available for comment. But I think as we record this, that there is a meeting going on Thursday, so we'll probably know a bit more. But in terms of it being a good fit, you can't argue against it, because available car, as you say, they've got 4 sites, and they've got a turnover of £330 million compared with Big Motoring World, £530 million. So, in our clip, he's talking about doubling the size of the company. That would pretty much double the size of the company. But I think more importantly, it gives Big Motoring World the geographical spread that they're looking for, certainly along the spine of the country, because at the moment, very much southeast based, going as far as Peterborough, because they acquired SW Cars in 2021. But this would take them further north and help them achieve that more national spread.
And we know scale. We know scale works. That's going to be key with this. That scale, access to product, being able to scale it, and just on that previous story, being able to move product around the business from one geographic location to another to meet demand or meet, local legislation, then that's where you take that advantage. So again, clearly, once this story breaks, we will cover it and we'll update on the latest. But we're now going over to Virtue with our friend Robert Forrester and a story on AM Online. And this week they've announced their update on financials, and I think generally Robert's been very busy recently. He's had quite a few appointments that they've been in terms of that leadership team at Virtue, and there's some great appointments. So if you've missed what Robert's been up to as a business there, then certainly check that out. But Virtue Motors remains upbeat despite EV and used car supply challenges. So that's that AM have picked up that saying that the recent increased supply of new electric vehicles appears to be exceeding retail demand and creating an imbalance in pipeline inventory coming into the key plate change month of September. So Robert's sort of highlighting this EV model supply against demand issue that they seem to be facing.
Yeah, it's very revealing, this, isn't it? And it's so timely, as you say, as we go into September, because within the story, they're very much talking about how manufacturers are reacting to this. I wouldn't quite term it oversupply, but it's getting on for that. We do now have a really good supply pipeline for a lot of EVs, and this is leading to manufacturers discounting on new car prices and supporting EVs with finance rates, really to stimulate that retail demand, because we know they're going to get snapped up in the fleet sector, but the key now is really to drive some retail demand and stimulate some activity there.
But positively, they in the output of their financials, I think they cite that the business is trading well. It's trading above previous years, and that's been aided by the recent Helston acquisition, which was completed in December last year, as we covered, and sort of now expecting the full year results for 2024 in line with current market expectations. So, quite clear that the board are remaining optimistic for the future, and they anticipate that the full year results will be in line with their current market expectations, and they're excited about the opportunities as they sort of build and enlarge their portfolio. So still a very upbeat and positive outlook for the business as they sort of look for what the Helston business will do in terms of their financial performance as they get towards the full year results.
And the final story this week comes from Motor Trader, and the headline is Head-In Automotive completes acquisition of Stephen James. So this is really very much a follow-up on a story that we covered. It's really just a few weeks ago when it was first mooted that Swedish-based Head-In Automotive was acquiring Stephen James. Now, Stephen James, listeners might recall, operates within the Greater London area. So it had 5 BMW and 3 Mini sites with 400 employees, and it's this was the second acquisition of Head-In within the UK, following its acquisition of 4 Mercedes-Benz retail group sites in the London area. So what's particularly interesting about this story is that they shed some light on how the business will actually be operated. So it will be operated as 2 separate subsidiaries. So there'll be Stephen James Automotive covering that BMW and Mini business, and Head-In Automotive London covering the Mercedes-Benz and Smart operations that it acquired.
Yeah, and I think every time we talk about Head-In, we sort of say that it's not going to be the last that we see of these guys as to what they start to do in the UK market. We know Anders Heading has obviously had clear ambitions for growth in the UK. He's I don't think he's, obviously it was started off with the Pendragon, didn't it? As it seems a long time ago when that conversation started, Curtis. But obviously then the Mercedes and subsequently this BMW Mini business. So I think there is clear opportunities there. And I think one thing we do learn from our interviews, particularly with CEOs and, over the years, and Robert Forrester and Dashcup to being just two of them, they get a lot of offers for opportunities, and they'll take each on their own merit, whether it fits within the business and looks to be a financial opportunity for them. So you can see there that Heading, they came in looking at the Pendragon business, but they've been presented obviously other opportunities in the meantime, haven't they? And taken those as an opportunity to expand their portfolio in the UK sector. So I'm sure we'll start to see this start to build out a little bit as that portfolio starts to make a little bit of sense for the business in terms of location and brand partners as they build out.
Yeah, you're right. It's very much a foothold in the UK, heading to one of Europe's biggest franchise dealer groups, and they will be looking at how they can scale up their operations in the UK now.
So that's it for this week. So they say, the Pete Waddell interview is still on your podcast feed. So if you do want to check that out, we'll try and put it on the link on the newsletter on Monday morning for you. So you can go back and have a listen to the full interview there with Pete Waddell that we did with him a couple of months ago. Fascinating, and it was well covered interview there with Pete Waddell. And obviously you'll get the full interview link with Devon Martin, who's sharing some light on the August market and what he's expecting as we move into sort of September and October in the months ahead. But I think we've covered quite a lot this week, Curtis.
We have indeed, yeah. It's certainly a busy week for listeners, but it feels like it's been a busy podcast for us as well.
Yeah, a little bit of editing doing there, Curtis. I think you like that one, but we'll see what the listeners think.
Yeah, definitely. But that's all for now. Many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next weekend, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
If you'd like to get in touch with Philip and Curtis, maybe with a press release, or even join them on a show, please send an email to motortraderadio@yahoo.com. You can also join the Motor Trade Radio LinkedIn and Facebook groups, or follow the podcast on Twitter.